What's up guys, my name is Brandon and today I'm going to be sharing my experience with iOS 13 on the 2016 iPhone 7. So we're going to discuss how Apple's latest software is running on this 3-year-old device and if it's worth installing on your iPhone 7 or 7 Plus. Now if you're curious about how iOS 13 runs on the iPhone 6s or the iPhone SE, check the cards and the links in the description down below for my reviews on those specific phones. But of course, in this video, it's all about the iPhone 7. So yeah, I've been using the iPhone 7 on iOS 13 ever since beta 2. And overall, the software has been running pretty well. I mean, I don't have too many major complaints. However, there are definitely some downsides to updating from iOS 12. But before we get into all the technical stuff and the performance, the battery life, and all that fun stuff, let's discuss some of the new features here in iOS 13. Now, if you guys watch my videos, you already know about pretty much all of the new features available in iOS 13. If you haven't watched all my videos, definitely check the links down below. You will find out all the new features in iOS 13. But I want to explain basically my experience with these features on the iPhone 7 specifically. Because as you guys know, everything performs differently on every different device. Like the iPhone 7 is going to perform differently than like the iPhone SE or the iPhone 6s when it comes to certain aspects of the phone. So anyways, let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about in iOS 13 is Safari. So Safari has a ton of improvements in iOS 13. So if you use your iPhone 7 or your iPhone 7 Plus to browse the internet a lot, which I actually find myself doing a lot on the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's just because I usually decide between the 6S, the SE, or the 7, and the 7's always the newer one, so I tend to go ahead and web browse on this. But anyways, you are going to love this update if you use Safari a lot. Now, the biggest feature I think is the built-in download manager. So if you go ahead over and try to find a download link right here, so here's just some no copyright sounds, instrumentals here, and you can see this is an MP3 download link here. If I go ahead and tap on that, you can see here, we can actually download straight within the Safari browser. So we no longer have to have like a third-party web browser for downloading like we had to in the past in iOS 12. We could just download right here in iOS 13. You see the little arrow there up in the top. We go ahead and tap on that. It actually shows our downloads right there. And we have that little magnifying glass. If we go ahead and tap on that, it takes us to our iCloud Drive where it shows all of our downloads in there. So you can see I have videos, I have audio files, images, all kind of things that I've been able to download straight from Safari. No other application needed. So that is definitely a huge improvement here for Safari, the built-in download manager. There's also some other things in here as well. We go ahead and get out of this right here. Let's go back over here. You see these two A's up in the status bar right here. If we go ahead and tap on those, you can see we have some new options here. We have hide the toolbar, which gives you a much cleaner look right there. We also have the request desktop website. Then we have website settings. So if we tap on that, we have some really cool new settings here inside of Safari. And these are going to be very specific options. You can see here, while viewing dailyiFix.com, it's only going to request the desktop or use the reader automatically for this specific website only. So you can set custom options for specific websites. So you can also allow access to camera, microphone, and location as well. And if we go ahead over to our settings and go down to Safari and scroll down a little bit, you will see we have some other new features in here as well. Now, close tabs. This is going to allow you to automatically close tabs if you don't close them very often. And I found this to be very useful on a phone like the iPhone 7 compared to like a phone like the XR. The XR is obviously a lot more powerful of a phone, so it's going to be able to handle having a lot more tabs open. But on the iPhone 7, you should definitely have this set to maybe like after 1 week or after 1 month so that Safari automatically closes your tabs after that set period of time. But of course, if you're like me and you don't have a lot of tabs open all the time, if you're pretty responsible about closing your tabs, you can just keep that on manual so that none of your tabs get closed out when you don't want them to. We also have a revamped share sheet here in iOS 13. So if you go to the share sheet, you can see it looks a lot different than it did in iOS 12. It looks a lot better in my opinion. If we go down here to edit actions, you can actually customize what shows up where. So you can have favorites basically, so that the things that you do most, like if you copy or if you add bookmarks the most, we can move this to the top. So we have add bookmark and copy always at the top when we go ahead and invoke the share sheet. So you can see there at the very top, add bookmark copy, and it's kind of sectioned off from the rest of the options there. So that's actually one of my favorite features in iOS 13 as a whole, not just on the iPhone 7 specifically, but it is a great feature to have on the iPhone 7 here as well, customizing the share sheet and just the whole look of the share sheet looks a lot better than it did. Now the swipe keyboard is also a nice feature to have on the iPhone 7 because it is kind of a smaller screen still. It's 4.7 inches, but it is small, of course, when you compare it to something like the iPhone XR or any of the plus size phones. I'm personally used to using those, so this 4.7 inch display is still small to me. Now, of course, it's not as small as the iPhone SE, but still 4.7 inches, you may find use in the swipe keyboard here. So using swipe gestures, just like you could in Gboard, to go ahead and type out your text there instead of individually typing each letter. Of course, it can get tight, especially if you have big hands on such a small 4.7 inch display. I've actually grown to use this feature a lot on the iPhone 7. I didn't think I needed it at first. I thought it was pretty much only for like the iPhone SE. That's the only time I really found use for it. But the more I've been using the iPhone 7, the more I've actually been using the swipe keyboard and enjoying it. Now, that's actually made me start using it even on bigger screens like the iPhone XR, just because it's more effective, but I still feel like the keys are so much smaller on this phone compared to the newer phones that it makes me want to use that swipe keyboard. So even if you don't have another phone with a bigger display, the swipe keyboard is definitely something to check out. You may actually like it better than typing. Now, I should also mention 3D Touch here in iOS 13. So it definitely acts a little bit different than it did in iOS 12, and that's because Apple is kind of going to haptic touch or a long press on all devices now instead of just 3D touch. So basically what I'm trying to say is that you don't need a pressure sensitive home screen anymore to be able to have the quick actions like you can see here on the home screen. So for instance, like on the iPhone SE, the iPhone 6S, actually the iPhone 6S could have 3D touch to begin with, but on the iPhone SE, you can actually do these same things. You can actually have like a version of 3D touch, even though it doesn't have a pressure sensitive screen. And basically what Apple's doing is taking the haptic touch engine that we saw first in the iPhone XR and actually putting that on all devices. So you can see now that it's kind of like 3D touch still. It's pretty much 3D touch, but it's more of a haptic touch than it is 3D touch like you've been used to. So it will pop up a little bit later than what you're used to. Peek and pop is going to be a little bit different. So 3D touch just acts a little bit different on iOS 13 than it does in iOS 12. It's more similar to haptic touch, but it will take a little bit of getting used to. And we will see when the new iPhones come out if they have 3D touch or not. Now, if we go to our settings, display and brightness, you can see here that we do have dark mode here in iOS 12. We can go ahead and activate dark mode just like so. You do also have the automatic toggle here. You can also go into your control center, 3D touch on the brightness toggle right here, and you will see dark mode down there in the bottom left. You can just go ahead and tap on that, and it will go ahead and invoke dark mode. So you can see the background even changes on the home screen, which is pretty cool. Now, of course, this is not an OLED screen, so you won't see the battery life benefits that something like the iPhone 10 or the 10s will see, but it still looks cool in all applications like the music application, your messages, everything is going to have that dark aesthetic look to it, which is really nice. Now, the blacks could be a little bit darker, but you're really only going to notice that if you compare it to like an OLED screen or like a screen like the iPhone XR. If you only have an iPhone 7, you're not going to be comparing it to another phone or anything like that. So you will definitely enjoy dark mode, even if it doesn't give you battery life benefits. Now we do also have the new volume HUD, as you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen. Your volume also goes up and down faster than it did in iOS 12. Definitely nice to have this less intrusive volume HUD right here, especially again on a 4.7 inch display that did take up pretty much the entire screen. So it's nice to have a much smaller version of that volume HUD now. You can also control it with your finger there if you want to. Now, if we go into the App Store and go to our profile, if you scroll down, you'll see this is where we actually have our updates. And what's nice here is that we can actually delete applications from the updates page here inside of the App Store. So I don't know about you guys, but my iPhone 7 doesn't have a ton of storage. I only have 32 gigabytes. So I'm constantly deleting applications and things like that. So it's nice to be able to do it inside of the App Store when you can see apps are getting updated like so, because sometimes they can get hidden in folders and things like that, and you kind of lose track of the applications you have installed. Now, of course, there are a lot of other small enhancements, changes, features, but those are just the main ones that stood out when using my iPhone 7 on iOS 13. Now, as far as performance goes, performance on iOS 13 here on the iPhone 7 is actually very, very good. I was surprised at how solid the performance is here. Even coming from iOS 12.4, iOS 13 is more solid, more fluid, and just quick overall than iOS 12.4 was. Now, I will say that the beta stages have been a little bit of a roller coaster for the iPhone 7. It started out shaky in the early beta stages, then it got better, then it got worse with betas 5 and 6, but now it's back to being solid again with the latest beta 7. And this is pretty much what we're going to see when the final version of iOS 13 gets released. Of course, there are going to be some minor bug fixes and things like that, but this is the type of performance and the battery life we're probably going to see with the final version of iOS 13 here in less than a month. And the good thing is that developers of applications have now updated their applications to support iOS 13. So very few applications crash on the iPhone 7 even. I did have an issue with Safari when I would 3D touch and then tap on hide link previews and then 3D touch again. The Safari application would crash in previous betas, but that has been fixed. Again, a lot of the bugs have been fixed here on the iPhone 7, which is really nice to see because this is still an older phone. I mean, it's considered an older phone and it's performing very well here on iOS 13. And one of the big changes you're going to notice coming from 12.4 is launching stock applications. They're going to load about 2 times faster than they did on iOS 12.4. So when you download iOS 13, you're going to notice a huge jump in performance when it comes to not only third-party applications and just moving around the OS, but also just launching stock applications. It's going to be much faster than it was in iOS 12. Now, the only thing I like better in iOS 12.4 is the battery life. So battery life is slightly worse here on iOS 13, unfortunately. I'm not sure if that's because of all the new features and changes, but I've noticed that it is consistently getting a little bit worse battery life than I got on really any version of iOS 12. Now, of course, that could improve with future versions of iOS 13, but I am noticing around 30 minutes less of screen on time compared to iOS 12. Now, if we go into our settings, battery health, you will see that we do have a new option there, optimized battery charging. A lot of people may be inclined and just really tempted to enable this, especially on a phone like the iPhone 7. You're really trying to get the most battery life you can, but I would highly suggest that you do not turn this on. And the big reason is because it makes your phone hot and it still doesn't work as well as it could in the future. It's still a very new feature, so it's not as effective as it can be. And again, it does heat up your phone. The iPhone 7 does tend to get a little bit more hot than other phones do, so you definitely don't want to do that and damage your phone and damage your battery in the process. But yeah, like I said, just slightly worse battery life. Again, 30 minutes may not be a big deal to you, but for me, when I test it consistently, I notice even if it's like a 10-minute change. So for you, 30 minutes of screen on time may not be a huge deal, especially if you charge your phone a lot, but that is one of the downsides I wanted to let you guys know about with iOS 13. So overall, should you update your iPhone 7 to iOS 13? And I say yes, definitely update to iOS 13. There are tons of new features and changes that are going to make your life easier, and just the OS is going to be a lot more fun to use because there are so many awesome new features and changes. And again, you will notice performance gains on a day-to-day basis. You are going to notice speed improvements, but of course the only payoff is going to be slightly worse battery life. But battery life isn't bad. I don't want to give you guys I don't want you to have the notion that battery life is bad. It's just a little bit worse than iOS 12.4. Just keep a portable charger on you and make sure you get that battery replaced if it's needed, and you'll be perfectly fine here on iOS 13. I know a lot of you iPhone 7 users probably need a new battery, so definitely get that checked out. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That is my review of iOS 13 on the iPhone 7. I am definitely enjoying it. I think it's a lot better than iOS 12 in pretty much every aspect, and I'm glad to say that I can definitely recommend this update to everybody. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Also make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date with all my iOS 13 videos. I will also be revisiting the iPhone 7 in a couple months now to make sure the iOS 13 is still running fine on it. So definitely subscribe so you don't miss that video. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.